Ahead of this year's World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos with the theme A Spirit of Dialogue, let's hear from the World Economic Forum's young global leaders and global shapers community. They are the young representatives from all over the world. And this is a joint presentation of the World Economic Forum and CGTN. The next generation, who's born in this century, are raised in a digital environment. They are well connected on social media, living with cutting-edge innovation like artificial intelligence. This is also a time of global turbulence, though, and uncertainties as well. On all of these, let's hear from our young leaders. When we are looking at the theme of this year's World Economic Forum annual meeting, in the spirit of dialogue, what kind of dialogue do you expect?
In my role at the NYC, I help Chinese entrepreneurs and also companies understand the rules and opportunities of US capital markets. But also beyond the listing, I also work to build partnership and also cultural exchanges among global companies. So I think those dialogues on innovations, on sustainabilities, on market integrity are crucial. Because I would say they turn shared understandings into action and also help maintain trust in the new age of the competition.
And this is the moment that globally we need proper, efficient collaboration rather than just taking pictures. So I am expecting the dialogue will be very in-depth and as an output, we will have very concrete actions out of this.
Most schools have smart boards or computers or laptops. There are a majority of schools in Southern Africa that don't even have internet. And so the conversations are very much around making people aware of what that is, but also showing them that there are tech-based solutions like ours that can be integrated at very low costs with high outputs and being able to show that we can bridge the gap and start integrating technology into these schools.
I think this is a really critical stage as some of the sort of superpowers and leaders so we kind of have long imagined are shifting, and as that balance shifts and there comes uncertain times, I think there's a lot of room to build new discourse and new narratives, which is why I also think that perhaps the dialogue that we should have as people attending the annual meeting is the purpose of the annual meeting. What does it serve in the larger conversation about how we think about our economy, and particularly for me, how do we think about it in relation to our natural world?
There are so many things that can be related to the final results of innovation. You know, you think about these factors, technology itself, social impacts, capitals, cultural understanding, entrepreneurial policy, geopolitics, education, talents, and what are the priorities for you? Balor, tell me more.
As I work in AI education, the other way to look at this is that AI can deliver them very good education, very good access to labor market, good access to skills. So the other way to look at in here is that how do we use AI to narrow down the world's inequality gap? And by the way, World Economic Forum studies says that it's going to take 123 years to narrow down the gender divide we have. So if you add AI pace into this, it's going to be unimaginable. But this is a very defining moment for us, whether to encourage to use AI for education, for access, and for equality. So again, briefly, AI education and delivering AI education worldwide is very important.
But when you talk about this, how do you look at what is going on? For example, a lot of people shape AI into a competition mode.
Yes. So from the 1990s, since we started the dot-com bubble, it has been always about competition, and Silicon Valley, Shenzhen in China has been competing, and there are many other stakeholders. But I think one of the things I want to raise is that we need to change the angle we look at technology. Now, the measurement of technology should be how impactful it is and how inclusive it is, rather than how advanced it is and who's winning the global competition. And there are many, many millions and billions of people being left out from this AI competition that we need to consider. And we did make these mistakes during the social media bubble, where we led many developing countries, many poor communities becoming victim of fake news and disinformation and misinformation. So with this AI, I think human to human, we need to, break the barrier and see what's going on in the world and evaluate technology as how impactful it is, how inclusive it is, rather than how advanced it is. So we have few different line of activities. First one, we work with companies on improving their efficiency. So let's say you have 2,000 employees. We do not recommend them to lay off, but we recommend to improve their efficiency and work as if you have 3,000 employees. So that's the idea of efficiency. Secondly, we have a lot of in-person classrooms for kids. And the way our revenue model, financial model works is that we invested money into our nonprofit work. So we trained Mongolia's first 500 AI teachers who are teaching 10,000 kids from the very rural small village to the city, to be able to deliver them AI knowledge from the algorithm to vibe coding and deep learning. Now we expanded to Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan and some other Asian countries to help them narrow down the inequality and education gap. And I think so far what we've seen, we've developed AI Tutor, which is helping kids from especially rural communities to learn high quality education, not only on technology, but math, English, social studies, anything they want.
Right.
So we are really witnessing the advantages and good sides of AI.
All right. Huzaifa, your thoughts?
For me, a priority would be humanizing innovation and making sure that it's people first. For us, what we're seeing is, of course, technology is advancing much faster than education systems and labor markets are able to adapt to. And so a critical focus in innovation would be, how do you unlock the access to it? How do you upskill our communities in terms of how to use the technology we're developing? And then also teach them a little bit of entrepreneurship. Number one, it's being able to give them the right tool. Number two, it's showing them how to use it. If you're giving somebody a computer and you don't teach them how to put it on or how to even access the internet, it's pretty much useless in their hands. So number one is give them the technology. Number two is teach them how to use it. And that's where the education angle comes in, is understand the power of a sword and you'll know how to use it, or understand the power of a knife and you'll know how to use it. And that's exactly where the focus should be, is people first and skills development first.
Indeed. As you talk about that, Huzaifa, in my mind, I'm trying to come up with stories and images of you trying to do what exactly you said. So tell me, what is it, the local circumstances when you are trying to do what you just talked about?
Absolutely, Wei. I'd have to invite all of you to come to South Africa so you can see what we're doing in schools. But imagine a school with just 4 walls, one computer in the classroom, and 45 kids who've never seen a computer before. What we do is we'll put a robot in front of them, a little yellow robot. His name is Novice. And what happens is we'll show them that within 30 minutes, they go from not knowing how to play with him to getting him to move with the lights coming on and making the screen light up or making him make some music. And the excitement behind it is actually what sparks an interest in a child, to be able to say, well, if this can light up and move forward, what else can I do? And so when you're talking about it, it's very much taking the technology in, going in with a computer, creating an internet hotspot, and then actually showing them a robot and saying, okay, well, this is what it is. It has eyes and ears. Can you make it see? And can you make it not hit into a wall? And so it's very practical over a period of 40 to 50 weeks, where we go into these classrooms almost on a weekly basis, train the teachers on how to use the technology, and then watch them go from no code to code.
Where are these classrooms?
Yeah, so for my focus, of course, Tshwane or Pretoria is where we're based, but our schools are not just in South Africa. We also have a footprint across 9 to 10 different countries. So we aim for the rural communities first, and the communities that are not always accessible. Mamelodi is an example of one in Pretoria where we work within, but we've also got a big socioeconomic divide. So in the same environment in Pretoria, you'll have some of the most rich people, wealthy people in the country, within 5 minutes of people that are below the poverty line.
And whom in which area, we talk about so many different things, which priority are you focusing on with your climate work?
What I'm focused on is making sure that innovation is seen from an intersectional lens. So we're talking about the development of new technologies and new tools that can rapidly increase efficiency. But we also know that in the case of AI, that leads to data centers, which are often placed in low-income communities and cause environmental pollution in these areas. We also know that these data centers are placed in countries that are looking to attract more capital and will have to give away and to be open to extractive industries in order to attract that capital. So I think having this more intersectional lens at looking at innovation is definitely one of my priorities. And I think also redefining where innovation comes from. So not just big companies, but really local communities who know the problems that they're facing and who also have the solutions. So how do we build a platform where these more local solutions can come to the surface and have just as much access to the growth potential and the capital they need to be able to scale up, but also recognizing that not all solutions fit in all of the different contexts that we're working on. And so how do we also allow for that flexibility in that expansion?
This year likely to be a great year for IPOs. You've seen already some of the innovation companies, especially in the field of AI, are rushing to the stock exchanges to get listed, not only in the U.S. but also in China and some other countries too. So, when it comes to the huge benefits likely to be enjoyed out of this, and also at critical times, companies are having this philosophy of surviving and thriving, but survive first. How do you see the capital market likely to respond to what you have just illustrated? In paper, it looks great, but do people really follow what they preach?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. So I think in good times, you see I would say you do see more collaborations, and then also I think the collaborations feel more natural, right? But I think today, I think with more, also in the field of finance, with probably we see more like protectionism and also rising competition is definitely harder. And also I think the global outlook is uncertain, and the companies are under, as you mentioned, they are under pressure to force on survival and on growth, to focus on survival and growth. So I think that side, the desire to do things for a collective good is still there. It hasn't gone away. So I think, in fact, it's even more important right now. So at the NYC, for instance, I think we continue to use our platform to promote collaborations, not just between companies and global investors, but also, I would say, among businesses within our listed community. Beyond IPO, we also created opportunities for partnerships, for knowledge sharings, and also for cultural exchange. So I think a very good example is we just had our second annual International Day at NYC last year, where we invited Yao Ming in his capacity as the chair of the Yao Foundation for a fireside chat on sports, global community, and also on social impact. So events like that shows how, I would say, business and also capital markets can be a bridge, not only for capital, but also for culture and shared values.
Go to you, Anh-Hoon.
Well, my proposal is to first understand that everything that we think about capital comes from the natural world. Everything that we use, everything that we consume, I think where we put valuation, where we see value creation coming from, I think that needs to change. And if we fundamentally start to shift that mindset, we become not just human-centered, but we become a much larger sort of nature-centered, where humanity is one part of that. First, I think we need to expand our imagination of what's possible, so there's definitely a bit of idealism there. We also need to recognize that before we got the Paris Agreement in 2015, the world was on track for global warming of 3 degrees to 3.5 degrees. Now we're on track from 2.3 to 2.5 degrees. Now that's still quite bad because the world has binding agreement to cap it at 1.5. But that means we've also been able to slow down warming in the past 10 years by about 1 degree. And that, for people in the climate movement, is huge. I can give two examples of this, one in the local context in Mongolia and two in the more global context. The first context in Mongolia is that earlier last year, the parliament put out a resolution that said the country will cease financing subsidies to coal from the state budget. And this was really groundbreaking because the country has subsidized coal for a really long time. We've already committed to doing this. Now we actually need to continue doing
Right.
it. The second thing is there was a landmark ruling from the International Court of Justice last year that said it is not a policy discretion, but a legal duty of countries. And this is the highest court in the world saying it is a legal duty of countries to mitigate against climate change and to protect people against the biggest catastrophes. So we already know what we need to do, I think, and people already have the policy speeches and the dialogues. It needs to get to implementation. And to get to implementation, we need these big systems and governments and corporations that are coming to the annual meeting to think differently.
Yeah. But Laura, you've been a government official. You know, between the ideal position and the reality, there's still a long distance. So when we talk about, the priorities and everything, how to do it, that is the key issue. Do you see this time the World Economic Forum annual meeting is going to be able to jump to the how part? From your perspective, what about the how?
I will say one word, which is bravery. So even one of the projects that I've led as a vice minister called eMongolia, where we digitalized 1,500 government services. It required us a lot of bravery to go through all the processes, to face the backlash from the internal system, to deliver the knowledge of using e-government platforms. So I think, especially when it comes to women's leadership, a lot of women work very hard, but one thing lacking is bravery. And especially in this interesting period of time that we are witnessing and living through, to be able to ensure that we have safer, sounder, healthier world. We require a lot of bravery from all different sources of leaders, from the private sector, from the NGO, from the international development. I think, especially from the YGL community, I see a lot of amazing leaders working in community level, sacrificing their lives for different people. So I think this is the leadership we want, and this is the leadership the World Economic Forum embraces, and bravery.
So you're arguing leadership, the quality of leadership, especially audacity, whether or not the leadership has, is the key issue. Huzaifa, what do you think is the key before we reach the how part?
I come from a very interesting context. When you look at South Africa, we've had a very murky past with the apartheid systems, with the social divides in the class system that has been created because of race in South Africa. So we're quite used to the whole divide and conquer system and all of those challenges for hundreds of years that we've experienced, which also resulted in our communities developing very, very community-centric mindset. So when we talk about times of scarcity, we have a concept in South Africa called Ubuntu, which is community, which is we all work together to achieve a common goal. So if you're hungry and I have food, we both eat. If you need to go somewhere and I have transport, we both go. And that's the fundamental thought process that is almost born into us as kids. We're taught to share, we're taught to work together. And so when we look at it, for us, this is something we've seen before. And it's just about now communicating that thought process of each of us have something to bring to the table together to allow us to solve multiple problems.
We are seeing the world is moving, but as we know, it's not always in a linear fashion. It's not always making progress. You are all young global leaders and global shapers of the World Economic Forum. You are probably the brightest, the most shining, the most talented among the young people from your country, your region.
Yeah, the world is changing really, really fast. And when we look at education, most of the countries who are sticking with their education system from the 1990s, very old system. It's requiring us to change the education system, but be very smart about it. So the future skill set that the workforce will be requiring is so much different from what it requires from us right now or 10 years before us. So I think the world, as much as AI is changing a lot of workplace in the world, it is creating a lot of human ingredients. So the AI to understand the human factors, human sensation, human feelings, it's requiring a lot of human working with technologies, human feelings embedding, human biases, human differences embedding into technology. So it's very important for us to raise our kids to be able to work and live with technology, but also shape the technology as how we hope the future should be. And it is a big issue globally, whether it's in China, whether it's in the US, whether it's in the
Yeah.
UK or Mongolia. It is requiring a lot of different perspectives, different views. And for that, again, we need to work very closely together to embed that into education system.
Thank you. And also, Huzaifa?
Our world is in the hands of the same kids that are one day in our classroom or today in our classrooms. And so it's the same with us going to Davos as a community. We're the people that will be responsible for driving policy, driving action, driving change in a few years. And we have to set those chess pieces in place in a way that makes sense. But when you talk about linearity and non-linearity, it's also about simulating that in a real world environment. When we try to do something, when we're trying to solve a problem, and if it fails, we don't just pack up and go home. We try something different and we make a change, and we continue iterating in that circular way with little minimal progress over time that compounds into something big. So for me, it's also about replicating what happens in the world in our education systems, like Bulo mentioned, and inside our communities, showing them the power of iteration, the power of just changing one thing at a time, and over time ending up with the result that you want. So I think for me, it's more about simulating that and bringing that down into a very simple sort of process, and then using that on scale later when we're actually driving policy change, in a larger context.
And Kun?
When we think about how we relate to different generations, not only the generation that is in leadership now and say leaders who are up and coming, but also as Huzaifa is talking about, the generation of leaders who are in the future. And if we don't pass down a world for them to lead, there is no world, there is no purpose. So I think, again, going back to those policy mechanisms, if we give a sort of a right to exist and a right to a healthy environment to future generations and to nature, that changes how we think completely about all of these things that we're talking about, and who deserves a seat at the table, who deserves a right to speak in that dialogue, and how do we represent the voices of people who aren't able to come to that table, particularly the annual meeting, which is a notoriously a very exclusive space.
We see a lot of skepticism, a sense of pessimism as well over the past few years. As young leaders from your region and your country, your field, how do you react to that? What can be done?
The theme that we're seeing actually comes from what Shanhao was saying earlier, which is that, dialogue is very important, but dialogue without direction is, conversation without any consequences. We keep talking about change, but we don't actually keep making change. And so the inspiration is, let's come to the party, let's talk about something we can actually do, and then go back and do it. And then come back together and see what we found. And we're probably going to start making some progress. The skepticism comes from lack of trust, and the lack of trust is a result of lack of action. So let's try and do something first, and then build trust by showing that we can actually bring something to the table.
All right. And Goon?
I think my source of hope are the people who are showing up despite everything, and especially Bator mentioned bravery, especially the leaders, both in government and in informal spaces, who continue to speak out against the injustices that they see. And a lot of that are my friends. And so I think when I see people speaking out, even while facing personal and sort of career consequences, that's where I get my inspiration, that we shouldn't just follow the tide, that something needs to change here.
Chen Hao?
What helped us move forward, I agree with my fellow speakers, is one is to continue create these opportunities for a dialogue so that leaders or CEOs or investors or social workers from different regions, sectors can come together and we create these conditions for collaborations and progress. But I agree, instead of just having brainstorming on ideas only, my hope is that we leave this year's Davos
Right.
not just on ideas, but also with concrete frameworks to march forward.
All right, last but not least, the warlord.
Hope, we somehow in the darkest and the most difficult times as humans, we see hope, and especially at this phase of the pace of this world, I'd like to think that we are in the most defining moments with AI transformation, with the geopolitical situations. And I think I always like to think the good guys win with their hard work and with their enthusiasm and with their leadership and with their bravery. So I really hope that this year's Davos will be no different, and we will get to define what's coming in the next 10 years, but in more positive, concrete actions.
I want to thank every one of you. You are helping me to get more inspired and more optimistic about our immediate future. Thank you so much for joining us. All the best. I'll see you in Davos.